Hello, welcome to Biology, the scientific study of life. Limitations of the biological species concept. While the biological species concept emphasis on reproductive isolation has greatly influenced evolutionary theory, the number of species at which this concept can be usefully applied is limited. For example, there is no way to evaluate the reproductive isolation of fossils or asexual organisms such as prokaryotes. Many prokaryotes do transfer genes by conjugation and other processes, but this transfer is different from sexual recombination. Furthermore, genes are often transferred between distantly related prokaryotes. It is also difficult to apply the biological species concept to the many sexual organisms about which little is known regarding their ability to mate with different kinds of organisms. For such reasons, alternative species concepts are useful in certain situations. Other definitions of species. While the biological species concept emphasizes the separateness of species from one another due to reproductive barriers, several other definitions emphasizes the unity within a species. For example, the morphological species concept characterizes a species by its body shape, size, and other structural features. The morphological species concept has advantages. It can be applied to asexual and sexual organisms, and it can be useful even without information on that extent of gene follow. In practice, this is how scientists distinguish most species. One disadvantage, however, is that this definition relies on subjective criteria. Researchers may disagree in which structural features distinguish a species. A paleontological species concept focus on morphologically discrete species known only from the fossil record. We are forced to distinguish many species in this way because there is little or no information about their mating capability. The ecological species concept views a species in terms of its ecological niche, its role in a biological community. For example, two species in Galapagos finches may be similar in appearance but distinguishable based on what they eat. Unlike the biological species concept, this definition can accommodate asexual as well as sexual species. The phylogenetic species concept defines a species as a set of organisms such with a unique genetic history. That is, as one branch on the tree of life, biologists trace the phylogenetic history of a species by comparing its physical characteristics or its molecular sequences with those of other organisms. Such analyses can distinguish groups of individuals that are sufficiently different to be considered separate species. Of course, the difficulty is in determining the degree of difference required to indicate separate species. Phylogenetic information sometimes reveals the existence of sibling species that appear too similar that they cannot be distinguished on morphological grounds. Scientists can then apply the biological species concept to determine if the phylogenetic distinctions is confirmed by reproductive incompatibility. The usefulness of each of these definitions depends on the situation and the questions we are asking. The biological species concept, with its focus on reproductive barriers, is particularly valuable for studying how species originate. Speciation can take place with or without geographic separation. Speciation can occur in two main ways, depending on how genes follow between the populations interrupted. Okay. Notice that two main modes of speciation. The first one represent this one, or allopatric speciation. A population forms a new species while geographically isolated from its parents' population. The second one, sympatric speciation. A small population becomes a new species without geographic separation. Notice that. Okay. Allopatric other country speciation. In allopatric speciation, from the Greek allos, which means over, and patra, homeland, gene flow is interrupted when a population is divided into a geographically isolated subpopulations. For example, the water level in a lake may subside, resulting in smaller lakes that are home to separated populations. A river may change course and split, not like this one, water. A river may change course and split a population of animals that cannot cross it. Allopatric speciation can also occur without geographic, without geologic remodeling, such as when individuals colonize a remote area and their descendants become geographically isolated from the parent population. An example is the speciation that occurred when the Galapagos Islands, following colonization by mainland organisms. How formidable must a geographic barrier to be to keep allopatric populations apart? The answer depends on the ability of the organisms to move about. Bears, mountain lions, and coyotes can cross hills, rivers, and canyons, nor do such barriers hinder the wind-blown pollen of pine trees or the seeds of many flowering plants. In contrast, small rodents may find a deep canyon or a wide river formidable barrier. Notice this figure. Once geographic separation has occurred, the separated gene pools diverge through or any or all of the mechanisms described in chapter 23. Different mutations are sexual selection takes a different course in the respective populations. Other selective pressures act differently on the separated organisms, and genetic drift alters allele frequencies. Because small isolated populations are more likely than large populations to undergo a significant change in their gene pool in a relatively short time due to selection and drift, they are also more likely to experience allopatric speciation. In less than 2 million years, the few animals and plants from the South American mainland that colonized the Galapagos Islands gave rise to all the new species now found there. But for each small isolated population that becomes a new species, many more perish in their new environment. To confirm a case of allopatric speciation, it is necessary to determine whether the allopatric populations have changed enough that they no longer have the potential to interbreed and produce fertile offspring. In some cases, researchers evaluate whether speciation has occurred by bringing together members of separated populations in a laboratory setting. Notice this. Separation can inquiry can divergence of allopatric fruit-fly populations lead to reproductive isolation. Okay. Biologists can also assess allopatric speciation in the wild. For example, females of the Galapagos ground finch Geopisa differentius. The name, scientific name of this finch, respond to the song of males from the same island